Jimmy's Old Time Radio Show. It's the back half of September 2020 and it's turned out to be a better 2020 than I thought it would. Had a bunch of shows and I've also had some interesting communications online. I've taken two messages and combined them into an idea. One person had written me through my Facebook page, Jimmy's Old Time Radio Show on Facebook, and asked if I ever do a blog. I haven't done a formal structured blog really yet for this work, but been thinking that I should. I don't know how structured it'll be, but here's a vlog in response. And then the other side of this is I had a message from a young activity manager, a fella named Daniel, and he wrote me all the way from Manchester, England. He had done a Google search and was inquiring about music programs. And thank you Google search, my name came up. So Daniel wrote me with a question, a nice email. I'll just read it to you. I am starting my first job soon in a care home. I am not great at improvisation and things like that. So my biggest worry is when it comes to running entertainment for the residents. Have you got any tips for me, please? Little things to say or do. So there's kind of two parts to Daniel's inquiry. He asks for tips, and then he interestingly mentions things to say or do. And I think that's a pretty insightful question. We'll get to that part. First, the tips. To me, there are three pillars of a music program. It comes down to resident safety, it comes down to resident experience, and then it comes down to your entertainers. They're obviously an element to entertainment. So doing those three pillars one at a time, let's start with resident safety. I have done a kind of a loose calculation of how many seniors have fallen at my music programs, and it is between 1 and 2% of music programs have some kind of an incident that can be called a fall. And it's never a good thing. Some are worse than others. And I've intervened in falls, I've caught residents, I've picked them up, and I've seen all kinds of different things. But for me, it comes down to resident safety is the number one most important thing to always keep in mind, whether it's a music program or otherwise. This is sort of a general discussion too, I should add. It could be pertinent to long-term care or dementia wards, retirement seniors, independent living. Totally different, but still some of the same rules apply. There are specific hazards during music programs. Portering, anytime you're moving residents back and forth, there's always challenges to that as residents start to walk, especially going into unfamiliar areas perhaps. Depends on your room. Everybody has a different room, of course, but you want to eliminate trip hazards. Keeping in mind seniors typically have slower cognition, impaired vision, impaired hearing, diminished spatial awareness. They're often on various medications and going through health issues that can affect their perception. So you have to be extra careful in regards to safety. Aisles need to be at least an arm's width wide. I just like to use that. It's approximately 2 meters, but if it's less than your arm's width, then there isn't really room for two walkers to pass each other. Things on the floor can be a hazard as well. So if I'm plugging in my amplifier and I need to plug into an outlet that's far away and I have an extension cord, I never like to have my extension cord crossing a path or crossing an aisleway. Sometimes it can't be avoided. So I use a bright orange cord. Sometimes I'll tape it down with a big X as well. But cords are never a good thing to have across the floor. So try to arrange your room so that there are minimal parts of the band or entertainer sticking out into the room, and that includes cords across the room. Chair legs are a trip hazard. Walker legs are a trip hazard. Another thing to really be mindful of is dancing. Some residents love to dance, of course, and you want them to have that physical exercise. Make sure that the room is flat, clean, not slippery, and a carpet can also be catchy. So the right kind of flooring it's a balance. It also comes down to what the resident is wearing on their feet. But if it's somebody that looks like they might stumble, maybe it should be the activity manager that's dancing with them rather than another senior. Somebody that can hold them up. Sometimes if you just hold them by the back of their pants and then the other hand on the shoulder, you can dance with a frail senior. When you're putting on a program, everything's set up, everyone is seated, the band is playing. As an activity manager, you want to be seated facing the room. You don't want your back to the residents, you want to be facing the doorway, and you want to see all the residents as they come and go, so you can be on the spot if there's any potential hazards coming up. And don't wait for things to unfold. You need to be proactive, you need to get up on your feet and go and assist somebody before they get into trouble. If you're serving snacks and drinks, there are food safety elements to a music program. You should talk to your nutritional manager. They should be well versed in what the protocols are for providing catering. So, tongs for cookies and cakes and stuff like that. Napkins, there should be sanitizer available. You can never handle the food directly with your hands. I mentioned sanitizer. It should be available to the entertainers. It should be at all the doorways. It should be available to anybody that wants to use it. Giving resident sanitizer is a whole topic unto itself. It's a good idea in principle, but I've seen folks in dementia wards that get it on their hand and next thing they're eating it, and it's, ooh, you just see the look of disgust on their face. So that's resident safety. Then there's resident experience. So they're seated for a concert. Hopefully you have a nice theater or a designated activity room with wide, comfortable seating and everything's laid out nicely. But you could be in any sort of room. You might be in a dining room. You might be in a busy front foyer. Hopefully though, your residents have a comfortable spot to seat where they can see the entertainer. Now I play alone. Whenever I'm positioned, I always try to find that I can see everybody's face. But if there's multiple entertainers, if there's pillars in the room, any other obstructions, line of sight can be broken up. But I do try to encourage people to remember line of sight. If you park a wheelchair and the entertainer's over there, park the wheelchair and then have a look to see if there's a potted plant in the way. And don't have residents facing the other direction. A resident that has to turn their head like this for an hour or longer to watch a music program is going to have a bad neck. Volume is obviously important as well. They need to be able to hear it, but it can't be too loud. Depending on the shape of the room, like when I start a music program, I start on a lower volume with a little reverb, very little reverb, and I build it up slowly. I try to ease my way into the program. I don't want to shock anybody. Now, you as a manager aren't going to be necessarily aware of what the band is going to do, but that's what I encourage bands to do. Start low, build up. Some residents just can't hear. They have hearing aids that are feedbacked, or they're on the floor, or the batteries are dead. Some are in the front, they're getting too much volume. Some are in the back, they can't hear enough. Speaking of keeping residents in the front and the back, I always recommend keeping those that are coughing or sneezing or any kind of contagiousness or disruptiveness, unfortunately. They have to be at the back of the room. If there's anybody that you think will need to be evacuated, make sure that they're seated near the doorway. I've heard many times residents will say they didn't know there was a music program. So getting the word out, notifications, is highly important. You can put posters all over the place, in the elevators, on their doors, newsletters, posters by the mailboxes. You can put little tabletop posters on their dining room tables. You can give them personal invitations. You can telephone them if they're in their room and they have phones. You can notify their family, a Facebook page, or do an email blitz of activities. I recommend keeping a database of email addresses of family members that might participate and volunteer and help porter their loved one. Your activity calendar, try to get one of those really big ones with the large font on it. Remember that those that are reading it have impaired vision largely, so you want to have as big a font as you can get away with. Just a little bit more about snacks and drinks. They can be a distraction. Like little bags of chips are really crumply and crackly, and they're a little annoying to sing through, but whatever, I just go with the flow. But I'm thinking of the residents. If somebody's trying to enjoy the show, a whole bunch of chip bags crunching is not exactly pleasant. And it doesn't always have to be sugary drinks either. Hydration is one of your mandates, so just a simple cup of water without ice. Just a nice cup of water is really all you have to do. Sometimes you want to have fancy drinks for a special occasion, but keep it simple. And I prefer non-disposables. You should get along with the kitchen staff well enough that you can go in and run a rack full of glassware. So that we've talked about resident safety and resident experience. The other pillar, the three pillars, are the entertainers. Your goal is to have a database of entertainers. And there's going to be all different types. Like I do this professionally full-time. I have a gerontology background. But then there's others that are volunteers. And there's school groups and church groups. And there's all kinds of different things. Like maybe the great-granddaughter's daycare class will just come in and dance for the residents. I mean, it doesn't always have to be professionals. You want to have a wide variety of material. Some that are free, some that are paid for. There's value in all of them. Keep your bookings in a simple day timer. I prefer a day timer instead of storing dates in my computer. For me to be able to just physically look at it and it's right there and I can erase it and change things and make notes. It works for me. I think it should work for a rec manager as well. Maybe one of the big day timers that goes on top of your desk. Make sure that it stays there too. If you leave the department, you need to be able to provide to the next manager all of your contacts, all of your bookings. That manager should honor them as well. As a note, I do my confirmations 1 month prior. I recommend that managers do that as well. So say I'm booked on the 28th of May. So the month before, maybe the middle of April, is the time to do all of your confirmations, because by say the last week of April, you want to have May's calendar ready to go. So do your confirmations a week or 10 days prior so that you have a chance to make corrections. There's always going to be corrections and changes. It's a fluid industry. I've seen all kinds of ways of scheduling programs. There are places that have regimented, it's only on Wednesday afternoons at 2 p.m. And then there's other ones that are all over the map. And I like the ones that have a balance of the scheduled, say, every Tuesday night there's a program. But then there's also flexible ones. But if you have a balance between scheduled and flexible, what happens is you're going to draw out different residents. There are some that just think they don't want to go out on Wednesday afternoon, they don't like music. But if they happen to walk through on a Thursday evening and there's something going on, you never know. They just might go and sit down and join in. A wide variety of programming at different times will draw out a majority of residents. If you have a last-minute cancellation, you need to have a virtual backup plan. That's partly what I've been focused on right now, is my virtual music. I have lots of concerts on my channel here, and those are intended for moments like that, when you need something in a pinch. Hopefully you have a system set up, a theater with a smart TV or a projector and a good sound system. But everybody's different. Even if you just have a flat screen on the dining room wall, go onto YouTube, go to Jimmy's Old Time Radio Show, and there's an alternative should something happen. And it's also great to just thicken up your calendar, have all your regular programming, and then throw in a few virtual shows as well. You just never know who you're going to draw out. And then a little encouragement about your budget. Often when you take over a department, your budget is reduced. You don't necessarily know what the last manager had, because over time budgets kind of go up. They tend to, or they should, I hope anyway. So whenever a new manager comes in, often the administrator will ratchet it back down. You can help your budget with fundraising. I have CDs for sale, Jimmy's Old Time Radio Show Volume 1. I've been passing them out to various facilities if they want to sell them at their tuck shop or at a fundraiser. Half the money is there. They can use those funds to buy more entertainers. And one more side note, whenever you have a big program, a professional entertainer coming in, that's a good time to coordinate with your marketing. It's a good time for them to bring in tours. It shows that the residents are engaged, there's something going on, there's some fun being had, hopefully there's some laughter and there's good music in the air. That's the best time to show a tour. So there's my tips. Daniel asked for tips, and then he also asked for what to say or do. And I think, again, that's an excellent question, because when you're working with seniors, it's a little bit of a different tempo. I've been kind of racing through this little speech here, trying to get everything as I can, but to demonstrate, when you're working with seniors, you need to slow down your voice. You need to get down closer to their level so that they can see your face straight on. And you want to speak up, because again, you have to presume that they have reduced hearing. Perhaps their cognition is a little bit slower as well. Be respectful, but keep in mind, you're talking to adults. These people have been around. You can speak to them like an adult with respect, and they want to be talked to like adults. It's important to listen to them too. It's a test of your patience sometimes. They can stutter, they can stumble, they can lose their thought. Stick with them for a little while. At least have them feel as though you've tried to understand what they're saying. And then sometimes you just gently have to nudge the conversation away. And when you do leave, walk slowly. It's not a race. For safety reasons, obviously, you don't want to barrel into somebody coming around the corner, but it just transmits an air of calmness and attentiveness. So Daniel, thank you for this really interesting question. This is perhaps the beginning of something new. Virtually, it has grown a lot for me. I've made a lot of concerts, and I'm going to be live streaming in October. Dates are in the doobly-doo. And interestingly as well, next week I'm doing a Zoom meeting with the recreation therapists in New Zealand. And really looking forward to that. Thank you folks, thank you Daniel, you all take care now, bye.